that first skill player trade really hits the spot when it comes to the 2026 NFL offseason, and a channel favorite for many years. David Montgomery is on the move to the Houston Texans in exchange for a 4th-round pick, offensive lineman Juice Scruggs, and a 7th rounder in a future draft. So Hayden, we're talking about a running back here who has been very productive with both the Bears and the Detroit Lions, but will be 29 years old at the start of next season. What does this do for you with the Texans backfield?
This one's pretty easy because David Montgomery is an early down thumper type, and Woody Marks, the guy they drafted in the 4th round last year, is the exact opposite. And now you have a 1-2 punch that complement each other very nicely. On the Texans side of it, they acquire his contract for this year, and then they basically have a $10 million option for 2027, which is pretty much impossible to get. Like Javonte Williams just signed for $8 million. I don't think that David Montgomery is going to like rewind the clock. So this is more or less a 1-year rental to get serious at running back. I think he's definitely a tier above what they had from Nick Chubb on early downs. But this largely doesn't solve their issue of being able to run the ball and generate explosives either. So I think it's an okay move for the Texans. I do think this is the last big move that they're going to make at the running back position, though, because Woody Marks is still on the roster.
So let's talk, if we could fast forward, why this might be a good move for the Houston Texans, if this does work out, right? Because the Texans at running back, after Nick Caserio got on the microphone, he basically alluded to not knowing for a year of what Joe Mixon's status was going to be. Couldn't tell us out here in the public if he even had surgery at this point. We know last year they went into the season with a broken Nick Chubb and a rookie 4th-round pick in Woody Marks, which, by the way, they spent a 2026 3rd-round pick on Woody Marks. So now they've spent 2 picks in this draft class, a 3rd-rounder and a 5th-rounder on Dave Montgomery and Woody Marks. But again, this is a Texans offense that we have hopes for, right? That we think can be good from a quarterback standpoint, from a wide receiver standpoint. Now, there are major deficiencies there. We have already seen Titus Howard be traded away, who's been a long-term starter offensive line for this team. D'Amico Ryans went on a microphone in NFL Combine and stated as fact how much they're going to invest in the offensive line, either in free agency or the draft or both. But at running back, they just had nothing competent in terms of being a full 3-down back. That is not a tell when he's out in the field, that can hold up in pass protection. And I think, Hayden, most importantly, this offense was 29th in red zone touchdown success rate last season, only better than the Chargers, the Saints, and the Jets. Now, a lot of that can be offensive line related, but I think part of it is running back related too. So from a fantasy football lens, Dave Montgomery is going to have plenty of opportunities to score touchdowns for this team as an inside the 10 and inside the 5-yard linebacker.
Yeah, that's where this makes it very straightforward for us. Running back 35 on underdog right now for David Montgomery. I'm looking at like Kyle Monungai's running back 28, Tony Pollard's running back 29, Jadarian Price, who struggled at the combine, he's running back 31. He's going to jump all of them. So we're talking about somewhere in the mid 20s, which I think is fair. That's kind of like the dead zone, but the dead zone's been pushed back. And so we'll probably be able to draft someone like David Montgomery in, 6th, 7th, 8th round, which I think is fair. I don't think that you're going to hit a home run by picking David Montgomery, but I also do think that the Texans have showed a commitment to kind of plotting running backs for many years. Yeah, no matter what. And I think this is the guy that they're choosing to stick with. And I think that's just how it's going to be. And then on the flip side, Woody Marks, he was like running back 37. That's way too high at this point. He needs to drop down a couple spots. There's still an upside if something happens to David Montgomery where Woody Marks can take on additional touches. But I do think Woody Marks, like, he didn't completely struggle as a rookie, but I wasn't like overwhelmed.
He was getting banged up basically every time he got more than 13 touches in a game.
Yes, that I thought there's some vision, some balance issues, but I think collectively he's a fine running back too. I do want to mention, like you said, the Texans have traded away early picks on the offensive line. They're trading away future capital for running back position. They just traded away Titus Howard. They are so desperate to fix the run game, and they keep trying to exchange bodies here. At some point, they have to hit on a draft pick. And they have not done that across the offensive line or at running back in a very long time. And that's why we keep seeing the Titus Howard trades. We saw the left tackle trade, obviously, last offseason. You trade for Joe Mixon. All these kind of moves, it's just that's how desperate they are. At some point, you just have to hit this in the draft, though.
I think that desperation can kind of play out during this part of the calendar just before free agency because nothing is locked in, right? technically, could you give a younger Tyler Algier maybe a couple $1 million less per year than what Dave Montgomery is about to make here with the Houston Texans this year and sign him? Maybe, but maybe like that wasn't in the cards,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. I just think that it's one of those situations where trading for David Montgomery does not solve the offensive line problem. And this is still largely an offensive line problem. Now, their running back situation was so bad since the Joe Mixon injury that I do think you had to get serious at running back. And I think David Montgomery on this contract, I'm not going to completely poo-poo this, but until they figure out the offensive line, that's the part that's actually really struggling here. And you even see that in the pass game, of course.
That's the efficiency element, though. The volume element, Dave Montgomery is going to get
easy.
The volume. And also, I would not overlook, if I was the public, his ability on passing downs too. I mean, there have been times over the last 2 years where he and Jahmyr Gibbs were neck and neck when it comes to just targets and receptions. He will be out there in pass protection. He will be out there as a complementary receiving piece. And the Texans just had to do something before the NFL draft when it came to the running back position, because it's not like you're going to be able to find or love a running back in every single round of this year's class. I think Dave Montgomery, even at 29 years of age, is probably talented in the majority of running backs that we picked in the 5th round of this NFL draft on top of it. So I understand he's 12th in AAV right now, even before the K9 and Brees Hall deals. But like you said, to me, this just is like checking the box of we are done at the running back position. And that really favors us when we look at, fantasy football drafts and where these guys are being selected. On the opposite end, now we need to talk about the Detroit Lions. We already had mentioned this with Coach Speak Index last week, that if Dave Montgomery got traded, where could Jahmyr Gibbs be drafted? So Hayden, as we sit here near the opening days of March, is Jahmyr Gibbs the locked in first pick in fantasy football drafts?
It's down to 2. Jahmyr Gibbs versus Bijan Robinson is going to be quite the debate. 2 electric running backs. I don't even know who's better at real life football. They're pretty much tier 1 across the board. And they both are going to have the backfields largely to themselves. So we get David Montgomery out of the picture, but you mentioned it, Tyler Algier with Bijan Robinson. He's going to get starting level money. So it's more or less going to be Bijan too. So these guys are going to have better fantasy seasons this upcoming year than they had previously. To put into perspective, there's been 8 games where Jahmyr Gibbs has not had David Montgomery on the field at all, or David Montgomery played 25% or fewer of the snaps. In those 8 games, he's averaging 25.1 half PPR points, which is like well beyond like the Christian McCaffrey seasons and stuff. Of course, he's not going to get 100% of the touches like he has there. The Lions are going to bring in somebody, but at the same time, that somebody is not going to be nearly as trusted or nearly as good as what David Montgomery was, not to mention Jahmyr Gibbs keeps getting better. There's nobody in the draft. Like there's just straight up nobody in the draft. So I'm leaning towards Jahmyr Gibbs as my 101, barely over Bijan Robinson. My tiebreaker is I know what I'm getting from Jared Goff, a very solid, strong quarterback. I have no idea what I'm getting from Michael Penix, or if it's even going to be Michael Penix out there. So my 101 will be Jahmyr Gibbs for now.
I really have nothing to add there other than if one of these teams does take a running back in the 3rd or 4th round, that could swing it one way or the other. It's an exciting time. I mean, we absolutely love free agency. We'll have reaction videos just like this whenever we have these trades ahead of Monday. And also once Monday hits and these skill players, wide receivers, quarterbacks, running backs, tight ends land on new teams, we'll have, these 10 to 12 minute videos here on the channel. I quickly do want to say the Texans offensive line has stunk previously. Hopefully Nick Caley takes a step as a 2nd-year play caller. None of these underlying metrics are perfect. Nick Chubb was 9th in yards before contact per attempt last season, which is quite good. Obviously, he didn't have the juice to maximize it at all. And unfortunately, obviously, Dave Montgomery goes from one of the best run blocking systems to now one that is purging starters. But I'm not going to be able to get over the volume of this. And maybe this is like a typical historical dead zone back that I kind of lock into. But I just think from a D'Amico Ryans, Nick Caserio standpoint, an organization that loves to trade for starters and give them opportunities. We saw it with Stephon Diggs. We saw it with Christian Kirk, who played ahead of rookies last year, by the way. Joe Mixon. There are many, many others at many other positions. This is just what they like to do. When we have an issue, a flag at one of our positions, we fill it with a veteran that has historically produced at a high level, and we give them every opportunity until he literally can't be on the field anymore. And that to me is what Dave Montgomery is going to be for the Texans in 2026.
And then if you go back and read the Woody Marks profiles or watch our video on Woody Marks, you can see how David Montgomery would pair up really nicely with that type of profile. Last note from me, Juice Scruggs goes in the deal. That is another player that the Texans whiffed on, the second round picks, 62nd overall in the 2023 NFL draft. I do think the Lions have some interior offensive line issues, and this is a good dart throw. And we've seen better organizations pick apart some flawed prospects and some flawed rookie contract guys and turn them into a starter. We saw that like with Mekhi Becton, for example, with the Eagles. I do wonder if the Lions could be one of these organizations where they can take your busted players and kind of churn them out for a year or two. So Juice Scruggs, a throw-in, but I think a quality one for the Lions end.
And again, we already mentioned it, but on top of that, they also trade a guard/tackle that has been moved around and former first-round pick in Titus Howard, who's been a mainstay for their offensive line for many, many years. Yeah, Scruggs was a 2024 starter, turned 2025 backup. The Texans have whiffed on a lot of their offensive line picks. I mean, Kenyon Green in the first round and then Juice Scruggs here. And we'll see about, Blake Fisher, who was the 59th overall player who might have stepped in as a starting right tackle. Jury's out.
Yeah, I mean, they chose to not play him at all. I guess they're going to have to now without the Titus Howard. Yeah, interesting.
We saw it a couple years ago. The Panthers attacked in free agency guard spots and interior. The Chicago Bears last year did theirs via trades. The Texans are the team this year that is poised to really, really rework their entire offensive line, and hopefully the results are good. All right, that does it. Again, if you're new around here, hit that subscribe button. We've got plenty more in the next, 2 weeks involving NFL offseason and player movement. So we see you then.